Hey y'all, I am back with another Astro-Crossword, and for this one I decided to play this video. It's called Six Hardest Would You Save? So it's basically about moral dilemmas, and y'all can play along with me. So the name of this crossword puzzle is called Base Coat. All right, so let me start the video.
Should you or shouldn't you? The hardest morality test ever. Some choices are pretty easy. Coffee or tea, fries or onion rings, boxers or briefs. Others, however, are so hard that they seem almost impossible to make.
Oh, and if I see any words pertaining to Aries, I'll point that out. So his basically, dealing with males, I'll include his as an Aries word.
We're specifically talking about moral dilemmas here, when both options just seem so unfair or undesirable, but something's got to be done. So get ready and calibrate your moral compass, because we've prepared the hardest test ever. It's full of moral dilemmas, and the way you solve them can speak volumes about your personality. After each question, you'll have 10 seconds to mull the situation over and come to a decision. Write down the letter of the answer you choose, A or B, to find out your results at the end of the video. And remember, this is just a quiz and not some session with a professional psychologist or anything. Hey, it's just me. So don't take it too seriously, okay? Number one, a runaway train. Imagine that you're the conductor of a train that you've suddenly lost control of and is about to crash into a group of five innocent bystanders, totally unaware of their
All right. Runaway train, five innocent bystanders so far. I just wanted to stop it because forehead, that's an Aries word.
impending doom. They'll definitely be killed by the impact unless you throw a switch that can divert the train to another track. But in this case, it would run over an unsuspecting man who's sleeping on the rails. Would you be able to throw the switch? A, yes, easily. B, no way. I couldn't possibly do that with a clean conscience. Starting off strong, I see. Dang, what a tough choice. Perhaps those five people will notice the train and get out of harm's way. Should you risk it? You've got 10 seconds to decide.
I already know what I would do. I would pick A, yes, easily, because that man shouldn't be sleeping on the train tracks. That's the that's the choice he made. That's a fuck around and find out type of situation. So for question number one, let me put A, yes, easily. That's sacrificing one life for five anyway. All right, next.
Number two, a trolley out of control. A streetcar is out of control and speeding towards a group of seven people. Okay, sounds familiar. Being on an overhead footbridge, you're not in danger. You see a big, bulky guy standing next to you, and you realize that if you push the man onto the track below the footbridge, it'll stop the trolley. However, the man will surely die. On the other hand, you'll save seven innocent people. Would you sacrifice one life for seven? A, I'd do it without hesitation. B, I just couldn't take a life, even if it meant saving seven other people. Well, they're not called moral dilemmas for nothing. What's the right thing to do here? If 10 seconds isn't enough to solve this problem, you can always pause the video.
I'm picking B. I just couldn't take a life because that takes conscious effort on your. I mean, even the first one did too, but this situation is different. I would just let fate take its course. And if, seven people die, I guess that's what fate wanted. That's Aries.
Number 3, a judge's dilemma. You are the judge at a trial of a bank robber who is in fact innocent, and you know it for sure. But at the moment, the enemies of the accused have kidnapped your 6-year-old daughter and are demanding that you convict the robber in return for her freedom. You have no idea where they're keeping her, and the police can't figure it out as well. You're a nervous wreck and can't help but think that the kidnappers will or already are abusing your child. Would you convict the innocent man to save your daughter? A, I would never convict an innocent person. I'd try to find another way to save my child. B, in a heartbeat. It's twice as difficult when a child, especially your own, is involved. Which alternative is your heart telling you to pick?
I'll pick B in a heartbeat because you can overturn that conviction. So that's what I would plan on doing. I would convict the innocent man in order to save my daughter and then overturn his conviction later on.
Four, your best friend's wedding. You've been invited to your best friend's big day. 2 hours before the ceremony is supposed to start, you notice your friend's future spouse sneaking out of some storage room with another guest. They both look thoroughly disheveled, and you realize that they're having an affair. And here comes the dilemma. If you tell your friend what you found out, their perfect day will be completely ruined. At the same time, how can you allow your friend to marry somebody who's unfaithful? What would you do in such a situation? A, I'd tell my friend about the affair. Everybody deserves to know the truth. B, I wouldn't say anything. After all, my job is to support my friend's new beginnings. Plus, I could be mistaken. It's not a life or death choice. We need a break from those. But it's still a tough one. To make a friend unhappy but aware, or keep them blissfully ignorant.
That's easy. I would keep them blissfully ignorant. I wouldn't let her know at all because I wouldn't be sticking my nose in their business like that. And I could be wrong. I could be mistaken. And then I would be the bad guy. And you still might be the bad guy if you tell her anyway. So, yeah, I'm not opening up that can of worms. She'll find out later if it's meant for her to find out.
Number 5, reporting Robin Hood. You've witnessed a crime. A man robbed a bank and got away with it. However, he doesn't keep the money for himself. He instead donates it to an orphanage that's on the verge of bankruptcy. After his donation, the orphanage's management can buy clothes, books, medicine, and food for the kids. Well, you know who committed the crime, but you also know that if you go to the police, the money will most likely be returned to the bank and the orphans won't get what they desperately need. So, what do? A crime is a crime after all. I'd turn the robber into the police. B, this money was used for a noble purpose. I'd keep my silence. Which side will your moral compass take? No one said this would be easy.
B, because the money, not even because the money was used for a noble purpose, I would just mind my business. So I'm picking B, especially because it was used for a noble purpose.
Number 6, a car crash and a killed pedestrian. You're on your way home from work one evening when you get into an accident with another car. Even worse, you've also hit and killed a pedestrian. However, as you're about to get out of your car, the driver of the other vehicle, a shocked woman in tears, runs toward you. Having heard her hysterical account of the event, you realize that the woman is absolutely convinced that it was she who killed the pedestrian, even though you know that you were responsible. Hey, there's nobody around, only the two of you. You understand that the person found guilty will, of course, be sent to prison. Knowing that, are you ready to
Wait,
own up to it?
I gotta
It
rewind this. I wasn't even paying attention.
was used for a noble purpose. I keep my six.
Okay.
A car crash and a killed pedestrian. You're on your way home from work one evening when you get into an accident with another car. Even worse, you've also hit and killed a pedestrian. However, as you're about to get out of your car, the driver of the other vehicle, a shocked woman in tears, runs toward you. Having heard her hysterical account of the event, you realize that the woman is absolutely convinced that it was she who killed the pedestrian, even though you know that you were responsible. Hey, there's nobody around, only the two of you. You understand that the person found guilty will, of course, be sent to prison. Knowing that, are you ready to own up to it? A. I would confess that it was my fault. How could I live knowing that an innocent person was convicted for something I did? B. I'd let the woman take the fall. I don't want to go to prison and spend years away from my family. Plus, maybe it really was her fault. Well, are you ready to face the music? Or are you going to dodge this bullet? Choices, choices.
I'm choosing A. I would confess that it was my fault. How could I live knowing that an innocent person was convicted for something I did? I couldn't live with myself. Nope.
We have one more question for you, and it's the toughest one of all. But before we throw it your way, let's check the results of this impossible test. More A's. If you chose more A's than B's, it means that you're a person who has a strict moral code, and you try to stick to your principles no matter what. You tend to thoroughly analyze a situation and choose the
Damn, I
option that
got
might be
more B's
beneficial
than
for more
A's.
people, even if it wouldn't be for you personally. More B's. If you chose more B's, you usually make decisions under the influence of your emotions. You're not very able to act according to commonly accepted moral rules if the situation feels too personal to you. Bonus. Who would you save? All right, listen up. Imagine you're standing on the bank of a rushing mountain river during a flood. The rapids are pulling your significant other, your family member, and a briefcase with $5 million in it underwater. Who or what will you save? You have only one rescue attempt and 10 seconds to decide what is most important for you. I see you guys taking the money. Yeah, I see you. All right.
So wait. I gotta. I'm too focused on this crossword puzzle.
Bonus.
Okay.
Would you save?
I know one's your spouse, one's 5 million. Who's the other person?
All right, listen up. Imagine you're standing on the bank of a rushing mountain river during a flood. The rapids are pulling your significant other, your family member, and a briefcase with
Family
$5
member,
million
but
in it
who?
underwater. Who or what will you save? You have only one rescue attempt and 10 seconds to decide what is most important for you. I see you guys taking the money. Yeah, I see you. All right.
This is like a trick question because he's not saying what family member because that depends. That one's hard because it could be any type of family. It could be a cousin. It could be an uncle or aunt. I would say if it was an immediate family member, I would choose the family member. If it was an extended family member, I would choose the spouse. I don't know if that makes me cold hearted or what.
Situation isn't so straightforward. It depends on your relationship with the people who are drowning.
Exactly.
Unless we're talking about real soulmates, most people would choose their family member. They are your own flesh and blood. Well, you'll never know where your relationship with your partner will lead. And if you've chosen to save the case full of money, well, something in your life has gone wrong. It's definitely something worth considering. So, do you agree with your results? Which dilemma was the most difficult for you? Let us know
The
about it in
last
the
one.
comment section below. And don't forget to click subscribe to be sure you don't miss our updates or new videos.
All right. That was
See you right back.
that was okay. Now let me pause this and find another short video to play while I finish this puzzle. Just 1 second. Okay, I found another video to play now. I've listened to this a couple of times in the past, but it's a really good story. And because it's Aries season and Aries rules war, I decided to play this video. It's only 15 minutes, 26 seconds long. It's about the Vietnam War. It's a Vietnam vet being interviewed by this man named David Hoffman. He has a YouTube channel, so you can go there and watch the video yourself and subscribe if you're into, deep interviews like this. But the title of this video is called He Made My Vietnam Story Go Viral with 21 million views. And as of now, it's at 22 million views. So this is a very good story, especially if you're into war stories. So let me start playing this and complete this puzzle.
Well, when I got to Vietnam, I I literally expected to be welcomed with open arms by the people of Vietnam. I had in my head the black and white newsreels I had seen on the Walter Cronkite 20th Century show of the American troops rolling through villages in France and being showered with wine and flowers and kisses. Um, and as we were driving down, a guy from the battalion I was assigned to picked me up in a Jeep at Da Nang, and we had to drive the 20 miles to where my battalion was located. And I really was disappointed that there weren't people standing along the road waving to me and offering me flowers and things. I really expected to be greeted as with open arms as a liberator, and it was as though I was invisible, as though I didn't exist. And that was a little perplexing. Moreover, they looked funny and they acted funny. I mean, just riding along in this Jeep the first day I got there. They lived in little straw huts and they had animals in their backyards, and they weren't like us. They smelled bad. The whole country smelled bad. You could smell it. It hurt the nose. And that was disturbing. And then I was there for on the third day I was there, this guy who had picked me up in the Jeep, a corporal who I was ultimately going to replace, he and I were in the battalion intelligence section. We were sent down to the tractor park, the amphibious tractor park, to meet a bunch of detainees. It was our responsibility to take care of prisoners, and detainees were a classification of civilians. They were not combatants. They could be detained for questioning. That's why they were called detainees. And Jimmy and I went down there to the track park, and two tractors came in. They had a whole bunch of Vietnamese up on top. The high, flat-topped vehicles, about 8 or 9 feet tall. And as the tracks wheeled into the park, the Marines up on top immediately began hurling these people off. They were bound hand and foot so that they had no way of breaking their falls. And they were old men, women, children, no young men. And I couldn't believe these guys were treating these people this way. And I turned to Jimmy and I grabbed him by the arm and said, what are those guys doing? We're supposed to be helping these people. And Jimmy turned to me and he looked at my hands on his arm, sort of took them off, and he said, Earhart, you better keep your mouth shut until you know what's going on around here. And I think it was at that point that I realized things were not quite what I was expecting. It went downhill from there. And again, I can't even begin to explain in the space of time that you have all of the things that went into it. But I began to understand it became obvious that the enemy was the very people in these villages around us. And we were in a very heavily populated area at that time. Um, they were the enemy, or at least the enemy was out there somewhere, and we couldn't tell one from another. And day after day, our patrols went out, and we ran into snipers and mines, and snipers and mines, and snipers and mines. I saw 4 armed enemy soldiers the first 8 months I was in Vietnam. And yet our battalion during that same period of time sustained 75 mining and sniping incidents per month, over half of them resulting in casualties. This is for a unit of about 1,000 men. But there was no one to fight back at. And you begin to think, these people are the enemy. They're all the enemy. And then you go through villages and, you get sniped at, and so you call an airstrike in on the village, and the whole village goes up. Or you go through a place and you search it, and you burn houses and blow them up. The common perception, the notion I had when I was in high school was that the Viet Cong terrorized the Vietnamese population, forced them to fight against the Americans on the pain of death. What I began to understand in Vietnam was that they didn't need to do things like that. All they had to do was let a Marine patrol go through a village, and whatever was left of that village, they had all the recruits that they needed. I began to understand why the Vietnamese didn't greet me with open arms, why they in fact hated me. But of course, that didn't change the fact that my friends were getting killed and injured every day, and the only place that you could focus your own anger and fear was on those civilians who were there. So it was this self-perpetuating mechanism. The longer that we stayed in Vietnam, the more Viet Cong there were, because we created them, we produced them. None of that distilled itself into the clear kind of expression that I'm presenting now. What I began to understand within days, and which became patently clear within months, was that what was going on here was not what I'd been told. What was going on here was nuts, and I wanted to get out. I knew if I were still alive on March the 5th, 1968, they'd stick me on an airplane in Da Nang. We used to call it the Freedom Bird. And I could fly away and forget the whole thing. Turned out not to be quite so easy to forget it, but that was the notion. And certainly for my last 8-9 months in Vietnam, I ceased to think. I quite literally ceased to think about why I was there or what I was doing. The sole purpose for my being in Vietnam at that point was to stay alive until I could get out. And the reason for that is that, the kinds of questions that began to present themselves were just, the questions themselves were ugly. And I didn't want to know the answers. It's like banging on a door. You knock on a door, and the door opens slightly, and behind that door it's dark, and there's loud noises coming, like there's wild animals in there or something. And you peer into the darkness, and you can't see what's there, but you can hear all this ugly stuff. You want to step into that room? No way. You just sort of back out quietly, pull the door shut behind you, and walk away from it. And that's what was going on. The questions themselves were too ugly to even ask, let alone try to deal with the answers. Now, part of what was going on is that I could not have made sense of what I was seeing and doing in Vietnam because I did not have a full deck of cards. I needed to have an understanding of the political and historical realities that brought us to Vietnam before I could make sense of what I was seeing. I began to acquire the other cards in the deck during the 3 years or so after I got back from Vietnam. But while I was there, nothing made sense because I kept trying to, play this game with 27 cards instead of 52 cards, and it kept not coming out right. And I didn't know why. All I knew was that it was nuts. I mean, it became clear within 3 or 4 months that my reasons for being in Vietnam were not clear. I mean, this notion of defending the people against these invaders from North Vietnam, the people hated me. The Vietnamese people hated me, and it was that was perfectly clear. I mean, people didn't say good morning to you. People didn't. I mean, people hated me. I know that some other people's experience was different, but in my own experience, the Vietnamese people hated me, and I gave them every reason to hate me. I beat them. I sometimes killed them. I destroyed their houses. I destroyed their crops. I destroyed their fields. I destroyed their culture. Why in the hell should those people like me? And I could see that I was doing that. And I could see that nothing we were doing was having any impact on the war itself. The funny thing about Vietnam is that I was getting Time magazine every week. It came in the mail. I could read about my war even as I sat in the middle of it. And I would read about what Lyndon Johnson would say and what McNamara would say and what Rusk would say. And I could look around and see that, I don't know what war they're talking about, but that's not what's going on here. We actually had an incident happen where one of our line companies stumbled upon a fairly large cache of Viet Cong weapons and ammunition, and Stars and Stripes, the daily newspaper that we received. This little action actually made it into the papers, and we read that we had set the Viet Cong effort back by 4 months in our area. Within a week of that article appearing in the paper, within 10 days of the incident itself, the bridge 150 meters in front of our battalion compound was dropped by Viet Cong sappers. An Amtrak coming in from the horseshoe area from one of the line companies hit a 50-pound box mine. Several men were killed. A bunch more were wounded. A patrol out at Phuc Troc Bridge was ambushed. Several people were killed. Several people were wounded. I mean, nobody told the Viet Cong that they'd been set back for 4 months. And yet this is what you're reading in the newspapers. This is what you're being told back in the United States. I could see that the war went on day after day after day, interminably, at the same pace, no matter what we did. I'm wasting your film. When I left Vietnam, I was in the midst of the battle for Hue City during Tet, 1968, February 68. And I'd been up in the city for 2.5, 3 weeks. I knew that my day was coming, but I wasn't sure when. And at that point, we weren't thinking about things like that. And we were in the middle of a low-key firefight. We were exchanging fire with some guys across the street from us out along the eastern, the northeast section of Hue City. What was left of my unit, the scouts, about 6 of us. And a Jeep comes hauling up the street along the river and whips into this little compound where we were and says, "There are your orders are in. Let's go." It was the lieutenant, my boss. And I stood, well, I didn't exactly stand up, but I immediately began to strip off my gear and distribute it to the other guys who were there and said, "So long, see you back in the world." Got on a Jeep. Last thing I saw of those guys, they were laying down covering fire for us. We burned our way back down the street. There was a chopper sitting on the LZ. I got on a bird, was up 3,000 feet above Hue City. 10 minutes after, I knew I was on my way out, and went through some processing. They yanked me out early because one of my older brothers by this time had arrived in Vietnam, and they arranged for me to spend a couple of days with him. And I got back, when I got back in early March, came in at night, went through more processing, a place called Treasure Island in San Francisco Bay. And then I was free to go. And I was still at time in the Marines. I had a month's leave, basically, before I had to report to another duty station in North Carolina. And I got a taxi. And there I was, my first view of the United States. And I could hardly wait. And it was absolute impenetrable fog. We came across the Oakland Bay Bridge, couldn't see 10 feet, couldn't see anything. Got to the airport. There was part of what affected my coming back. I was happy to be alive. I was excited, but at the same time, I was very ambivalent. I was afraid, partly because I had a girlfriend when I went over there, and in September, 8 months after I was there, I got a Dear John letter from her, and I kept hoping that I'd be able to fix this up once I got back. And I did not know what kind. And that woman, that girl, had become the focus of my life while I was in Vietnam. She had ceased a person. She'd become this icon. And then, of course, she had sort of, said, take a hike. But you can't just let go of a vision like that, of the thing that has kept you going. So I was scared about all of that. I didn't know what I was going to find when I finally got back to the East Coast.
All right, so that's the end of that. I'm gonna play this one.
Just imagine
Another war story.
100 people,
David Hoffman interview.
Continuously in a high stress situation where you are surrounded by fear, unknown, darkness, and there are people out there who desperately want to kill you. And imagine all of a sudden a shot rings out or an explosion takes place, and friends of yours are now on the ground screaming, a leg is gone or they're shot. A helicopter comes and takes them away, and you never know what happened to them. You had no way to find out if they lived or died, where they were from, or anything. Years later, as you thought back on the war, as you relived that particular incident when your friend was wounded, you were frustrated because you never were able to find out what happened to him. This person literally disappeared in your life. You've been watching Vietnam veteran David Bowman, who back in 1989 did this interview with me, talking about why the Vietnam Wall meant something to him and his buddies. I'm David Hoffman, independent documentary filmmaker, and I did this interview with David back in 1989 as part of 200 interviews I was doing on people's experiences back in the 1960s. You're about to hear David tell you his extraordinary experience, because when he got out, when he came back, he became a San Francisco cop and a street cop in 1968 and 1969. Those were very rough years in San Francisco, as you're about to hear. If this has meaning for you, could you please click the super thanks below the video screen on the right side? It supports my efforts and allows me to present more of these interviews, Vietnam vets and others who grew up at that time. Thank you, viewers. Thank you, David. When did you say it's done? Or for you, it was done, for you personally? It had to have been 1975. You have to remember, my 1960s incorporated my years in the service, and the extension of that being the war, the demonstrations, the radicalism in the United States. That didn't end. That cause, end the war, NLF is going to win, ho, ho, Ho Chi Minh, didn't end until South Vietnam fell. And when it fell and the war was over, at that point, the 1960s ended for me, because the war finally ended as a war. And then it was put away for many, many years in a trunk in an attic, and recently opened. You didn't talk about it, Phil. In the police department, we did. And I used what I had learned and what knowledge I had gained, both in Vietnam and in this late 60s, early 70s, to help the officers now coming into the department. You have to remember, in 1975, 76, in that time, those officers weren't in the service. The draft had ended. The war was over. They were just coming out of school. They didn't understand what they may face out there when they faced it.
These puzzles are super easy. I had to download Microsoft Ultimate Word games because I could only do one puzzle a day with this damn USA Today.
Gunmen. So I was charged, as were some other people, with trying to teach them how to protect themselves. I went into the police department in 1969, and in February of 1970, I was assigned to Park Police Station in San Francisco, which was the station charged with patrolling the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco. The radical underground was in full swing and had been for several years. And a few months prior, the Ingleside Police District Station or precinct had been bombed by a pipe bomb being placed on a windowsill, and several officers were killed. We had officers being assassinated, shot on the street for no reason. There was not a crime taking place. We were being sought out and shot indiscriminately. So these stations erected these enormous fences, chain link fences around them, about 10, 12, 15 foot tall, and installed lights facing outward. And it became another hilltop base camp. And I found myself working the midnight shift, and I would arrive at midnight, and I was given an M16 rifle. And I walked outside the police station, just outside the lights, outside of the fence, and I would patrol because the station was inside of Golden Gate Park. We were surrounded by trees and undergrowth. And there I was, back in Vietnam, protecting a base camp on the East Bay of San Francisco, the People's Republic of Berkeley. And we, the San Francisco Tactical Squad officers, would have to get onto San Francisco
There's a damn word.
railway buses and be bused over to People's Republic to help the Berkeley Police Department because their department was so small. When it got out of hand and we, the multi-jurisdiction departments, couldn't handle it, then they called in the National Guard, as in the case of People's Park. People went out and they carried signs and they chanted. When they went beyond that, where they were taking over areas, they were not allowing normal civilians to walk through. They would block roadways and arteries. They would break windows of stores and then start throwing things. Then it became the riot. We were at war. Yeah. But in a way, I think it helped me because you have to remember that a lot of the combat infantrymen who returned from Vietnam returned from massive assaults to your being, your psyche, and then cut off and sent back into a world in which they had no control. I was sent back, and then I went into the police department. My war continued, and I was weaned off of it over a period of probably 6 or 7 years. As the war wound down, radicalism wound down, and then I moved on to something else in the police department, into investigations. So my war, I was gradually weaned off war where others weren't. And I think it helped me as far as traumatic stress and those kinds of things. You have to remember that the people who were in that counterculture, particularly the people who were really politically involved in the Haight-Ashbury, where I was working, had the term I used to use is they conformed in the nonconformity. They didn't wash. They didn't change their clothes. They smelled. They had dirt all over them. They'd walk the streets, and they were doing drugs, and they were very, very unkempt, sloppy, and they had a whole different world, and I wanted no part of that. It's not like you just had long hair and a granny-type dress on, and it was clean. It wasn't that way. Yeah. And they were, to describe some of the craziness, at Park Station, I remember standing outside, and a couple drove up in a huge school bus. At that time, the city was loaded with Volkswagen vans and school buses, and they lived in a school bus, and they carried this bundled package into Park Police Station. I was in front. I walked in with them into the station. They opened up the bundled package, and it was a dead baby. They were leaving the city and going off to a commune in the country, and they wanted to turn this in like, wow, man, we can't handle this anymore, and we wanted to give you this, and we're leaving, and you take care of it for us. And it didn't, I couldn't understand that they didn't feel the parental feelings towards this child. They were just discarding another thing in their life that they didn't need as they moved off into the country to a commune. Obviously, we didn't let them go. But the way I think about it is not knowing what you saw or what the audience sees, the people in the lens of that camera. I feel that what I've seen is probably what a lot of people have seen. I can't understand what you've seen. I can't walk in your shoes. I wasn't there. I only know what I know. And I saw a lot, but then again, so did a lot of people. There are other people who saw more, who suffered more. I was wounded, but slightly in Vietnam. I have friends now who have lost limbs and just literally are destroyed, both physically and psychologically. They lost a lot more than I did.
I want to ask you a very important question about the Vietnam War Memorial. I want to talk to you about what that memorial meant when you saw it, what it means to you, the symbol of it.
It's important more than being a piece of.
Okay, I'm gonna stop right there, but that concludes this Astro Crossword puzzle. Hopefully you found those videos interesting, and I'll be back with some more videos. I'm working on a video right now. It's a sponsored video about a famous person, so stay tuned for that. And if you would like a reading, you can go to my website. The link is in the description section. Peace, many blessings. I'll be back soon.